When I found my daughter living as a maid in the $4.5 million house I bought for her, she did not even recognize me as her father. She flinched when I raised my hand thinking I was going to hit her. I calmly reached into my pocket not for a weapon, but for my phone to call my lawyer. I told him to prepare the papers because it was time for justice. My name is Richard Caldwell. I spent 40 years building skylines in Dubai and Doha, pouring concrete into the desert until it turned into gold. I thought I was building a legacy for my family. But while I was across the ocean, a snake was living in my garden. If you have ever felt the cold sting of betrayal by someone you welcomed into your home, hit that like button. And if you believe that a father's love is the one force you should never underestimate, subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments which city you are watching from. The California sun was unforgiving that afternoon. It beat down on the pavement of the Bel Air driveway, making the air shimmer with heat. I stepped out of the yellow taxi, gripping the handle of my battered leather duffel bag. I looked like a drifter. My khaki trousers were stained with travel dust, my boots were scuffed, and my face was weathered by the Middle Eastern sun. No one looking at me would guess that I had just wired $10 million to my offshore accounts that morning. To the world, and to the man inside this house, I was just a tired old man coming home to die. I looked up at the house. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture. Glass steel and white stone. I bought this property for my daughter Sarah on her wedding day. It was supposed to be her sanctuary. But as I walked toward the iron gates, something was wrong. The landscaping was manicured. The fountain was running, but there was a stain on the perfect image. There was a woman on the driveway. She was on her hands and knees in the middle of a puddle of motor oil and dirty water. She was scrubbing the asphalt. Not with a pressure washer. Not with a broom. She was using a tiny toothbrush. I stopped. The heat radiating off the blacktop must have been 100 degrees. She was wearing a gray uniform that looked 2 sizes too big, stained with sweat and grime. Her hair, which I remembered as a vibrant cascade of gold, was dull and matted, tied back in a messy bun. She looked frail. Her shoulder blades poked through the thin fabric of her dress like broken wings. My heart hammered against my ribs. I took a step closer, squinting against the glare. "Hey," I called out, my voice raspy from the long flight. "You do not have to do that in this heat." She did not look up. She scrubbed faster. The sound of the bristles against the stone was a frantic scratching noise. It was the sound of fear. Suddenly, the heavy oak front door swung open. A man stepped out. He was wearing a silk shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest and Italian loafers that cost more than the taxi I just took. Gavin. My son-in-law. The man I had entrusted with my most precious treasure. He did not see me at first. His eyes were fixed on the woman scrubbing the ground. "Sarah," he barked. I froze. My blood turned to ice. Sarah. This emaciated, terrified woman scrubbing the floor like a servant was my Sarah. Gavin walked over to her holding a glass of iced scotch. He stood over her, casting a long shadow. "I told you to get that oil stain out an hour ago," he said, his voice dripping with boredom and cruelty. "My partners are arriving at 6. If I see one spot of grease on this driveway, you are sleeping in the shed again." He pulled his foot back and kicked the bucket of dirty water next to her. The gray water splashed all over her legs and the clean section of the driveway she had just finished. Sarah gasped, scrambling backward on her hands and knees. "Oh, look what you made me do," Gavin laughed, taking a sip of his drink. "Now you have to start over." That was the moment the old Richard died. The architect who built bridges and negotiated deals vanished. In his place stood a father who wanted to burn the world down. I dropped my bag. It hit the ground with a heavy thud. "Gavin," I roared. The sound echoed off the stone walls of the canyon. Gavin spun around, spilling a little of his scotch. He squinted at me, his face twisting in confusion, and then slowly into recognition. But there was no fear. There was only disgust. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," Gavin sneered. He did not step back. He did not apologize. He looked me up and down, taking in my dirty clothes and my tired face. "Richard, we thought you were dead in a ditch somewhere in Qatar." I ignored him. I walked straight past him to Sarah. She was shaking her eyes fixed on the puddle of water, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the sweat. "Sarah," I said softly. My voice trembled. "Sarah, honey, it is me. It is Dad." I reached out to touch her shoulder. I just wanted to hold her. I wanted to wrap her in my arms and take her away from this madness. But the moment my fingers brushed her sleeve, she screamed. It was not a scream of joy. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated terror. She scrambled back across the hot asphalt, scraping her skin, desperately trying to get away from me. She curled into a ball, covering her head with her arms. "No, please," she cried out, her voice cracking. "I will clean it. I promise I will clean it. Do not put me in the dark room. Please, sir, I will be good." I stood there, my hand hovering in empty air, my heart shattering into a million pieces. She did not know who I was. She looked at her own father and saw only another monster coming to hurt her. "Sir," I whispered. "Sarah, look at me." She peeked out from behind her arms. Her eyes were hollow. There was no recognition in them, just a glaze of medication and trauma. Are you the new master?" she whispered. "New master." The words hit me harder than a physical blow. I felt bile rise in my throat. I looked up at Gavin. He was leaning against the hood of his Porsche, smirking. "What did you do to her?" I asked. My voice was low, deadly quiet. Gavin shrugged. "She is sick, Richard. Very sick. The drugs the doctors have her on make her a little confused. But hey, labor therapy helps her focus, keeps the crazy at bay. You are treating her like a slave." I stepped toward him. My hands clenched into fists. I could feel the urge to violence pulsing in my temples. "Careful, old man," Gavin laughed. He took a step forward, towering over me. He was younger, stronger, and clearly confident in his power. "Look at you. You look like a beggar. I heard the project in Dubai went bust. Did you lose it all? Richard? Is that why you are here, to beg for a handout?" He poked a finger into my chest. "Well, the bank is closed, Richard. This is my house now, my rules, and Sarah. She is under my legal conservatorship. That means I own her, and by extension I own everything that was hers." He took another step, forcing me back toward the gate. I stood my ground. I stared into his eyes, memorizing every line of arrogance on his face. I was recording this, not with a camera, but with my soul. Every insult, every smirk, every tear my daughter shed was being tallied on a ledger he did not know existed. "I am not leaving without my daughter," I said. Gavin laughed, a dry, barking sound. He walked to the massive front door and put his hand on the handle. "You are trespassing, Richard, and frankly, you smell like economy class. If you want to see Sarah, you can fill out an application. Maybe I will let you help her scrub the toilets next week." He opened the door, and the cool air from the air conditioning rushed out, smelling of lavender and expensive perfume. A stark contrast to the smell of motor oil and fear outside. But right now, Gavin pointed a manicured finger toward the side of the house where the garbage cans were lined up. "If you are hungry, the cook might have some leftovers. Use the servant's entrance around the back. This door is for family and guests. And you, Richard, you are neither." He slammed the heavy door in my face. The lock clicked shut with a sound like a gunshot. I stood there in the heat, looking at the closed door. I looked down at Sarah, who had gone back to scrubbing the driveway, humming a lullaby to herself, completely lost in her own broken world. Gavin thought he had won. He thought he had slammed the door on a broken, penniless old man. He had no idea that he had just locked himself inside with a man who had hunted wolves in the desert. He thought I was a beggar. He did not know that the beggar had just decided to buy the bank, the house, and the very ground he stood on. I picked up my bag. I did not go to the servants' entrance. I walked to the side of the gate into the shadows where he could not see me, and pulled out my satellite phone. I dialed a number I had not used in 15 years. It rang once. "Sterling," I said. "Richard," the voice on the other end gasped. "My God, we thought you were dead." "Not yet," I said, watching my daughter through the bars of the gate. "But someone is going to wish I was. Freeze all the accounts connected to the Pierce estate. And Sterling. Get the jet ready. I have a war to start. If you want to know what I found in the medicine cabinet that proved my daughter was not crazy, and how I turned Gavin's own party against him, hit the subscribe button. You are not going to want to miss what happens next. The game has just begun." The walk to the back of the house felt like a march to the gallows. Every step on the flagstone path I had paid for was a reminder of my failure. I skirted the edge of the property, passing the infinity pool, where I had imagined my grandchildren learning to swim. Now it was just a backdrop for Gavin's vanity. I reached the servants' entrance, a heavy steel door designed to be invisible to the guests, and pushed it open. The kitchen was massive, a chef's dream of stainless steel and marble filled with the aroma of roasting rosemary lamb and freshly baked bread. But the scene that greeted me froze the blood in my veins. My daughter Sarah was not sitting at the granite island. She was huddled in the far corner near the pantry, sitting on a small plastic stool. In her lap she balanced a paper plate. She was eating the crusts of sandwiches that had been cut off for the party platters, shoving them into her mouth with trembling hands, as if she had not eaten in days. My stomach turned. I took a step forward, my boots heavy on the tile floor. Sarah looked up, her eyes widening in panic. She dropped the piece of bread she was holding and scrambled to hide the plate behind her back. "I am sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. "I was just hungry. Please do not tell him. I will work harder." Before I could answer, before I could fall to my knees and beg for her forgiveness, the swinging door to the dining room burst open. A woman marched in. She was wearing a dress that cost more than my first car and dripping in jewelry that I recognized. That diamond brooch on her lapel belonged to my late wife. It was Patricia Gavin's mother, the woman who played the role of the devout charitable matriarch at church every Sunday. "Well," she said, stopping in her tracks. Her lips curled into a sneer that cracked her heavy makeup. "I thought I smelled something rotting. It seems the ghost has finally decided to haunt us." "Patricia," I said, my voice steady despite the rage boiling inside me. "Do not speak to me like we are friends, Richard," she snapped, walking over to the counter and pouring herself a glass of wine. "You have some nerve showing your face here. 15 years. You left this poor girl alone for 15 years. We all thought you were dead, rotting in some black site prison, or buried under a sand dune in the Middle East." I tightened my grip on the strap of my bag. She was using my greatest pain as a weapon. She did not know about the project that went wrong, the government seizure of my passport, or the stroke that had left me paralyzed in a foreign hospital war ward for 3 years, unable to speak or move, fighting every single day just to breathe so I could come back to my daughter. "I was detained," I said quietly. "I came back as soon as I could walk." "You abandoned her," Patricia spat, taking a sip of wine. "And now you waltz back in here looking like a homeless drifter expecting a welcome parade. You are lucky Gavin is a saint. Any other man would have thrown your daughter onto the street years ago." "A saint." I looked at Sarah, who was now cowering against the wall, terrified of Patricia's raised voice. "You call this sainthood? She is eating trash in the corner of her own kitchen." Patricia laughed, a cruel tinkling sound. "She is eating what she deserves. Do you have any idea what we have been through?" The embarrassments. The episodes, the door opened again, and Gavin entered. He had regained his composure, his face set in a mask of arrogant pity. He was holding a thick manila folder. "Mother, please," Gavin said, waving a hand dismissively. "Do not waste your breath. Richard does not know the reality of the situation. He has been too busy playing hide-and-seek in the desert." He threw the folder onto the kitchen island. It slid across the marble and stopped in front of me. "Read it," Gavin said. "Or do not. I do not care. But those are the court documents." I opened the folder. The papers were stamped with official seals. Superior Court of California. Conservatorship order. The words blurred before my eyes, but the meaning was clear. Gavin Pierce had full legal control over Sarah Caldwell's person and estate. "What is this?" I asked, looking up at him. "It is the only thing keeping your daughter out of a state institution," Gavin said, leaning against the counter. "About a year after you vanished, Sarah snapped. The grief," she said. "But we knew the truth. It was the drugs. She started seeing things. She became violent. She set fire to the guest house, Richard. She almost killed us all while we slept." I looked at Sarah. She was rocking back and forth, muttering to herself. This was not the girl I raised. But drugs, Sarah had never even touched a cigarette. "That is a lie," I said. "Sarah never used drugs." Gavin sighed, as if explaining calculus to a toddler. "Addicts are good at hiding things." The court agreed with me. She was declared mentally incompetent. I was granted conservatorship to manage her assets and her care. We tried the best rehab centers in Malibu. Nothing worked. The doctors said her brain is fried. The only thing that keeps her calm, the only thing that gives her structure, is routine. "Hard work." He gestured to Sarah's maid uniform. "It is called occupational therapy," Gavin said smoothly. "Labor therapy. It grounds her. If we let her sit around, she starts screaming. She starts hurting herself. We give her tasks to give her purpose. We are saving her life, Richard." I looked at the medical reports in the file. Dr. Eris Thorne. I memorized the name instantly. The report listed diagnoses of paranoid schizophrenia, severe opioid dependency, and violent tendencies. It looked official. It looked perfect. And I knew, with the instinct of a man who had negotiated with warlords, that it was completely fabricated. "So you took her money to pay for your lifestyle, and you made her a slave to keep her quiet," I said. "I am managing her assets to pay for her care." Gavin corrected, his eyes narrowing. "Do you have any idea how expensive it is to maintain a property like this? The taxes alone are a fortune. We are sacrificing our lives to take care of your damaged goods." He snatched the folder back and slammed it shut. "Now I have guests arriving in 20 minutes. I cannot have a vagrant standing in my kitchen. You need to leave." I looked at the back door. I could leave. I could go to a hotel shower, call my team, and return with a SWAT team. But if I left now tonight, what would happen to Sarah? I saw the way Patricia looked at her. I saw the bruise on Sarah's arm. If I left, they might punish her for my appearance. Or worse, if they suspected I had resources, they might move her. Hide her where I could never find her. I needed to be inside. I needed to see exactly how this machinery of abuse worked, so I could dismantle it gear by gear. "I have nowhere to go," I lied. My voice cracked, and I let my shoulders slump, playing the part of the defeated old man. "The project. I lost everything, Gavin. My bank accounts are empty. I spent my last $20 on the taxi here." Gavin and Patricia exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated glee, the mighty Richard Caldwell reduced to a beggar. It fed their ego in a way money never could. "Please," I said, forcing myself to look at the floor. "Just let me stay. I can help. I can fix things. I am good with my hands. I just want to be near my daughter. I will not get in the way." Gavin tapped his chin, pretending to think. Well, we did fire the gardener last week, he mused. He was charging too much. Gavin, no, Patricia hissed. We do not want him here. Think of the savings, Mother Gavin whispered loudly. And besides, who better to clean up the dog mess in the yard than the man who bought the dog? He turned to me with a shark-like grin. Okay, Richard, you can stay, but not in the house. The guest rooms are for people who matter. He pointed through the kitchen window to the far end of the property, where a small, dilapidated wooden shed stood behind the pool equipment. It was a tool shed, barely big enough for a lawnmower, let alone a human being. You can sleep in the shed, Gavin said. There is no electricity, and the roof leaks, but it is dry enough. You will take over the gardening and the heavy maintenance, 6 a.m. Start time. And regarding food. He looked at the crusts on Sarah's plate. We do not run a charity kitchen. You eat what you earn. If you do a good job, maybe the cook will give you a plate. If not, you can share the kibble with the dog. Do we have a deal? I looked at the shed. It was a humiliating offer. A degrading, dehumanizing offer meant to break my spirit. But Gavin did not know that I had slept in shipping containers in the desert heat. He did not know that a shed was not a prison to me. It was an observation post. I looked him in the eye. I let him see the defeat he wanted to see masking the predator that was waking up behind my eyes. We have a deal, I said. Good, Gavin clapped his hands. Now get out. Use the hose outside if you need to wash. You smell like failure. I picked up my bag and walked out the back door. As I passed Sarah, I wanted to whisper that I was going to save her, but I couldn't risk it. I just gave her a nod. She didn't look up. I walked across the manicured lawn, the grass soft under my worn boots. I reached the shed and pulled open the creaky door. It smelled of gasoline and fertilizer. Spiders had spun webs in the corners. I threw my bag down on the dusty floor. I sat on an overturned bucket and waited until the kitchen lights went out and the party lights in the front came on. Then I reached into the hidden lining of my duffel bag. I didn't pull out a gardening trowel. I pulled out a laptop with a military-grade encryption key and a small high-definition fiber optic camera coil. Gavin thought he had hired a gardener. He was about to find out he had just invited a demolition expert into his foundation. I was going to strip this house down to the studs, and I would start by finding out what was really happening in this house when the lights went out. The investigation had officially begun. The air inside the shed was thick and stagnant, smelling of rusted iron and old gasoline that had leaked into the dirt floor years ago. Spiders had spun intricate webs in the corners, claiming this forgotten space as their kingdom. To Gavin, this was a dungeon, a place to humiliate a broken old man. He thought he had stripped me of my dignity by forcing me to sleep among the rakes and bags of fertilizer. He did not know that dignity is not something you wear like a suit. It is something you carry in your bones. And he did not know that he had just given me the one thing I needed most: privacy. I waited until the last light in the main house flickered out. The laughter of the party guests had faded into the night, replaced by the chirping of crickets and the distant hum of traffic on Sunset Boulevard. I sat on an overturned crate, my back aching from the long flight and the tension of the day. I pulled my battered leather duffel bag onto my lap. To the naked eye, it looked like garbage, but inside the lining, stitched between layers of worn canvas, was my life insurance. I reached in and pulled out a matte black laptop. It was not a consumer toy you buy at an electronics store. It was a ruggedized field unit designed to survive sandstorms and shockwaves. I had used this machine to coordinate construction logistics in war zones. Now it was my weapon in a war for my family. I flipped it open. The screen glowed with a faint amber light as I bypassed the standard boot sequence and loaded a secure operating system. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I did not need Gavin's Wi-Fi password. I had designed the electrical grid of this estate 15 years ago. I knew where every conduit ran, where every hardline was buried. I initiated a brute force entry into the smart home system. It took less than 3 minutes. The security firewall Gavin had installed was expensive, but it was lazy. It crumbled before me. One by one, windows opened on my screen. The security cameras. I saw the living room littered with empty wine glasses and discarded napkins. I saw the hallway lined with portraits of Gavin and Patricia. And then I found the feed for the basement. My heart stopped. The basement had been designed as a wine cellar. It was cool, dry, and windowless. Now it was a prison. On the grainy black and white feed, I saw a small cot pushed against the concrete wall. There were no pillows, just a thin gray blanket. Sarah was there. She was not sleeping. She was sitting on the edge of the cot, rocking back and forth, her arms wrapped around her knees. I zoomed in. The resolution was poor, but I could see her lips moving. She was talking to herself. I hacked into the audio feed. "Please," she whispered. "Please let me be good tomorrow. Please do not let the dark come." I covered my mouth with my hand to stifle a sob. I wanted to smash the screen. I wanted to run into that house and tear it apart brick by brick, but I forced myself to watch. A soldier does not look away. A soldier observes. Suddenly, the door to the basement room swung open. Sarah jumped, pressing her back against the cold wall. It was Patricia. She was still wearing her evening gown, the sequins glittering under the harsh fluorescent light of the hallway. She did not look like a grandmother coming to check on a sick child. She looked like a predator entering a cage. She marched into the room. Sarah whimpered and tried to cover her head. "Get up," Patricia hissed. Her voice came through the laptop speakers, tinny but clear. "I am sorry. Mother, Patricia." Sarah stammered. "I cleaned the driveway. I did it all." "Shut up, you useless girl," Patricia snapped. She grabbed Sarah by the arm and yanked her off the cot. Sarah stumbled, her weak legs giving out, but Patricia held her up by her hair. "Where is it?" Patricia demanded. "Where is what?" Sarah cried. "The key," Patricia shook her. "The key to the safety deposit box. Your mother's emeralds. I know you have it. You hid it before you went crazy. Where is the spare key?" I gripped the edge of the workbench so hard, a splinter drove into my palm. My wife's emeralds. They were the only thing Sarah had left of her mother. I had given them to her on her 18th birthday. Patricia was not just satisfied with the house and the money. She wanted to strip Sarah of every last memory. "I do not know," Sarah sobbed. "My head hurts." "I do not remember," liar Patricia slapped her. The sound was sharp and sickening. I stood up. The crate I was sitting on crashed to the floor. Red rage flooded my vision. I did not care about the plan. I did not care about the evidence. I grabbed a heavy iron wrench from the wall. I was going to kill them. I was going to walk into that basement and end this nightmare with my bare hands. I kicked the shed door open. The night air hit my face, cooling the sweat on my brow. I took a step onto the grass, the wrench heavy in my hand, ready to sprint across the lawn and shatter the glass of the back door. But then I froze. Headlights swept across the front gate. A car was moving slowly down the street. It was a police cruiser. I pulled back into the shadows of the large oak tree, my chest heaving. The cruiser stopped in front of the gate. Gavin was standing there, smoking a cigar, admiring his stolen kingdom. The window of the police car rolled down. "Evening, Mr. Pierce," the officer called out. His tone was not official. It was warm, deferential. Officer Miller Gavin replied, leaning casually against the gate. "Quiet night." "Quiet enough," the cop laughed. "Just making the rounds, keeping the riffraff away from the good citizens. You let us know if you have any trouble with that new gardener you mentioned. We can haul him in for vagrancy if he gives you a sideways look." Gavin laughed, puffing on his cigar. "I will keep that in mind, Miller. He is just a harmless old stray. but I appreciate the offer. Come by the office tomorrow. I have those tickets for the game we talked about. You are the best, Mr. Pierce, the cop saluted. The cruiser rolled away, disappearing into the darkness. I stood there in the shadows, the wrench slipping in my sweaty grip. The cold reality washed over me, dousing the fire of my rage. Gavin did not just own the house. He owned the narrative. He owned the local law. If I stormed in there now and attacked Patricia, Gavin would call Officer Miller. They would find a crazy old man assaulting a defenseless woman. I would be arrested, thrown in a cell, and Sarah would be left alone with them forever. I looked back at the shed. The blue light of the laptop was still glowing in the dark, a single unblinking eye. I lowered the wrench. I stepped back into the shed and closed the door. I sat back down in front of the screen. On the monitor, Patricia had given up. She threw Sarah back onto the cot and stormed out, locking the heavy door behind her. Sarah curled into a ball, sobbing silently. I put my hand on the screen over my daughter's image. "Hold on, Sarah," I whispered. "Just hold on. I cannot use my fists. Not yet. I have to use my mind." I typed a command into the laptop. I started a recording loop. Every second of footage, every slap, every threat was now being uploaded to a secure cloud server in Switzerland. I needed more than anger. I needed indisputable proof. I needed to catch them in a lie so big that not even their crooked police friends could save them. And tomorrow I was going to start digging. Not for weeds, but for the poison buried in the heart of this family. The first night was over. The war had officially begun. The sun had barely set when the parade of luxury cars began to snake its way up the driveway. Bentleys, Ferraris, and custom Range Rovers filled the courtyard I had designed for family barbecues, turning my home into a showroom for the vain and the greedy. From my vantage point, in the rose bushes, where I pretended to prune dead leaves in the fading light, I watched the guests arrive. They were men in suits that cost more than most people earn in a year, and women who looked like they were carved out of silicone and ice. They walked past me without a glance, their eyes fixed on the front door, where Gavin stood, holding a crystal tumbler, playing the part of the magnanimous lord of the manor. I pulled my cap lower over my eyes. To them, I was just part of the scenery, a dirty old man with a pair of rusty shears. But I was listening. I was memorizing faces. I recognized a few of them. There was a city councilman who had been investigated for zoning fraud. There was a banker known for predatory lending. This was not a social gathering. It was a congregation of vultures, and Gavin was the ringleader. Then the front door opened again, and my breath caught in my throat. Patricia stepped out, clapping her hands for attention. "Gentlemen," she announced, her voice shrill with excitement. "Please come to the patio. We have a special treat for you tonight. Our very own Sarah insists on serving you." My stomach turned as Sarah stepped into the light. She was not wearing the modest gray uniform from earlier. They had dressed her in a costume that was designed to humiliate. It was a maid's outfit, but it was short, tight, and completely inappropriate. It exposed her thin legs and the sharp angles of her collarbones. She looked terrified. Her eyes were wide and glazed, darting around the crowd like a trapped animal. She held a heavy silver tray loaded with champagne flutes, her arms trembling under the weight. "Look at that!" A man with a thick neck and a cigar laughed, nudging Gavin. "I thought you said your wife was sick. She looks ready to work to me." Gavin chuckled, slinging an arm around the man's shoulders. "She has her good days and her bad days," Gavin said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The doctors say structure is good for her. We let her help out. It makes her feel useful. Otherwise, she just sits in the dark and screams. Sad, really." He looked over at me, catching my eye as I knelt by the flower bed. "And speaking of charity," Gavin continued, pointing his glass at me. "Everyone meet Rick, our new gardener. Found him sleeping in the gutter outside the gate. I decided to give the poor old guy a chance." Rick waved to the nice people. Laughter rippled through the crowd. I slowly raised a hand, forcing a toothless, senile smile. I had to play the fool. If I broke character now, if I stood up and drove these shears into his chest, Sarah would pay the price. Good man, Gavin sneered. Now back to the roses, Rick. Do not let the bugs bite. I turned back to the bushes, but my eyes were locked on Sarah. She was moving through the crowd offering drinks. I could see the sweat beading on her forehead. She was mumbling something, a rehearsed script Patricia must have beaten into her. Champagne, sir. Champagne, sir. She reached a group of men standing near the pool. One of them, a heavy-set man with a red face who had been drinking since he arrived, turned and looked her up and down with a lecherous grin. Well, hello there, sweetie, he slurred. You are a little skinny for my taste, but you have got pretty eyes. Why do you not put that tray down and come sit on my lap? I will tell you a story. No, thank you, sir, Sarah whispered, taking a step back. Just champagne. Oh, do not be boring. The man reached out and grabbed her wrist. His fingers dug into her skin right over the bruises I had seen earlier. Come here. Let go, Sarah cried out, a flash of her old spirit breaking through the chemical haze. She yanked her arm back. The movement threw her off balance. The heavy silver tray tipped. It happened in slow motion. The crash of crystal on the stone patio sounded like an explosion. Champagne sprayed everywhere, soaking the man's expensive Italian suit and splashing onto Gavin's shoes. The music stopped. The chatter died instantly. You stupid cow, the man roared, shoving Sarah backward. Look at my suit. This is silk. Sarah fell hard onto the patio stones. She curled up instantly, covering her head, waiting for the blow. I am sorry. I am sorry, she wailed. I gripped the handle of the pruning shears in the darkness. The metal bit into my palm. My muscles coiled, ready to spring. I took a step out of the bushes. I did not care about the plan. I did not care about the evidence. That was my little girl on the ground. But before I could move, Gavin was there. He did not help her up. He did not apologize to her. He reached down, grabbed the front of her dress, and hauled her to her feet. Look what you did, Gavin screamed. His face twisted into a mask of demonic rage. You embarrassed me, you useless, clumsy junkie. He raised his hand. No, Gavin, please. Sarah begged. He slapped her. It was a full-force, open-handed strike. The sound cracked through the silent courtyard like a whip. Sarah spun around and collapsed again, her cheek instantly turning red. A trickle of blood ran from her lip. I froze. A guttural growl rose in my throat, but I bit my tongue so hard I tasted copper. I watched as the guests looked away, sipping their drinks, pretending they had not just witnessed a crime. They were complicit. Every single one of them. Gavin smoothed his jacket and turned to the guests, a fake apologetic smile plastered back onto his face. My apologies, everyone, he said, stepping over his weeping wife as if she were a pile of trash. As I said, she is very unwell. The medication makes her clumsy. Mother, take her to the basement. Lock the door this time. Patricia emerged from the shadows, grabbed Sarah by the hair, and dragged her away. I watched my daughter disappear into the house, her eyes meeting mine for a split second. There was no hope in them, only infinite darkness. I fell to my knees in the dirt, shaking uncontrollably. I had to close my eyes to stop myself from screaming. I began hacking at the rosebush in front of me, destroying the flowers, channeling my murderous rage into the earth. Gavin walked over to the man with the wetsuit, handing him a napkin. Do not worry about the suit, Bob Gavin said. I will buy you 5 new ones. Just consider it a cost of doing business. He put his arm around the man and walked him toward the edge of the patio, stopping just a few feet from where I was crouching. They did not lower their voices. They thought the old gardener was too deaf or too stupid to understand. I am sorry about the drama, Gavin said, lighting a cigar. But honestly, it is for the best that you saw that. It proves why I need to move fast. The man Bob wiped champagne off his lapel. She is a liability. Gavin, Bob grunted. But the property. The property is impeccable. You really have the authority to sell, I mean with her condition. That is exactly why I can sell. Gavin replied, blowing smoke into the night air. The court granted me full power of attorney to liquidate assets for her long-term care. I am going to sell this place, Bob. It is too big, too many memories for her. I am going to put her in a specialized facility in Switzerland, permanent residency. And with the money from the sale, he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I am going to invest every cent into your development project in Nevada. $4.5 million cash. We close the deal on Friday? Bob grinned, greed lighting up his eyes. If you can sign the deed, we have a deal. I stopped cutting the roses. The shears hung loosely in my hand. Friday. Today was Wednesday. Gavin wasn't just abusing Sarah. He was erasing her. He was going to sell the house, my house, the safety net I built for her, and use the money to lock her away in a foreign institution where I would never find her. He was going to bury her alive and use her own inheritance to pay for the shovel. I looked up at Gavin's back. He was laughing, clinking his glass against Bob's. He thought he was a genius. He thought he had played the system perfectly. But he had made one fatal miscalculation. He thought the house belonged to Sarah. It didn't. Technically, the deed was in the name of a shell company I had established 20 years ago, a company called Phoenix Holdings. And the only person who could authorize a sale for Phoenix Holdings was not Sarah. It was the chairman. Me. But Gavin had forged documents. He had a corrupt judge. If he tried to sell it on Friday, he would discover the block on the title. And when he did, he would panic. He might kill Sarah to cover his tracks before fleeing. I had to act before Friday. I had to destroy him before he walked into that closing meeting. I stood up, wiping the dirt from my knees. The party was winding down. The guests were leaving. Gavin went back inside, leaving the shattered glass and the spilled champagne on the patio. I walked over to the spot where Sarah had fallen. I picked up a shard of crystal. It was sharp enough to cut skin. I wrapped it in a handkerchief and put it in my pocket. I was not just a gardener anymore. I was the demolition crew, and I had just found the structural weakness I needed to bring the whole house down. I turned and headed back to the shed. It was time to make a phone call to Switzerland. Not to a hospital, but to a bank. The countdown had begun. The morning sun offered no warmth as I watched Gavin's silver Porsche roar out of the gate, followed closely by Patricia's sedan. They were heading to the city for a meeting with their lawyers, confident that the old gardener was busy pulling weeds in the backyard. They had no idea that the moment their taillights disappeared around the bend, I dropped my rake and moved toward the house with the precision of a ghost. This was the window I had been waiting for. I knew the alarm code because I had watched Gavin punch it in from the reflection in the hall mirror the day before. 1984, the year he was born. A narcissist never changes. I slipped inside the air conditioning, hitting my sweat-dampened skin. I did not stop to look at the furniture or the art they had stolen. I headed straight for the master bedroom on the second floor. This used to be my room. I had designed it to capture the morning light, a place of peace. Now it smelled of stale cigar smoke and cheap ambition. The king-sized bed was unmade, a tangle of silk sheets that made my stomach turn. I walked past it to the heavy mahogany desk in the corner. It was locked, but a simple tension wrench from my pocket made short work of the mechanism. The drawer slid open with a soft click. I began to sift through the papers, my hands moving quickly but carefully. I needed to leave everything exactly as I found it. Beneath a stack of unpaid bills and gambling slips, I found a thick leather binder. I opened it, and the breath left my lungs. It was a petition for permanent incapacitation. Gavin wasn't just planning to sell the house. He was filing a motion to have Sarah committed to a state psychiatric facility indefinitely. The document cited a rapid decline in cognitive function and violent outbursts. It was dated for tomorrow morning. He was going to lock her away before the ink on the sale deed was even dry. He was discarding her like a used wrapper. I took out my phone and photographed every page. My hands were steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was proof of intent, but it wasn't enough. I needed to know how. How had he managed to turn my brilliant, vibrant daughter into a shuffling shell of a human being in just 3 years? The medical reports claimed schizophrenia, but the onset was too sudden, too convenient. I closed the desk and moved to the ensuite bathroom. It was lined with marble I had imported from Italy. On the counter sat a row of amber prescription bottles. I scanned the labels. Antibiotics for Gavin. Blood pressure medication for Patricia. Nothing for Sarah. That didn't make sense. If she was as sick as they claimed. Where were her meds? I opened the medicine cabinet. Nothing. I checked the drawers. Nothing. Then I saw it. On the top shelf, pushed all the way to the back behind a stack of towels, was a large plastic bottle with a cheerful label. Vitality Plus. Daily multivitamins for women. It looked innocent. It looked like something you would buy at a health food store. But the seal was broken and the cap was loose. I took the bottle down and poured a few pills into my palm. They weren't the chalky white of vitamins. They were small, round, and blue with a specific alphanumeric code stamped on one side. I didn't need a medical degree to know that vitamins don't come with pharmaceutical imprints. I pulled out my phone again and typed the code into a pill identifier database. The search result loaded, and the room seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Thorazine, chlorpromazine hydrochloride, an antipsychotic used to treat severe mental disorders, and next to it, another pill from the same bottle. Lithium carbonate. I stared at the pills in my hand, my vision blurring with red-hot rage. These weren't vitamins. This was a chemical lobotomy. Thorazine is an old drug, a heavy tranquilizer known for turning patients into zombies if the dosage is too high. And lithium is toxic if not carefully monitored. They were feeding her a cocktail of heavy sedatives every single morning, disguised as health supplements. No wonder she didn't recognize me. No wonder she was shuffling and drooling. Her brain was swimming in a toxic soup designed to suppress her memories and motor functions. They were poisoning her. Every day, Gavin probably handed her these pills with a smile telling her they would make her strong, while he slowly erased her soul. This was not just abuse. This was attempted murder. I carefully put the pills back into the bottle, leaving just one of each. I wrapped the stolen samples in a tissue and shoved them deep into my pocket. This was the smoking gun. With a toxicology report, I could prove that they were drugging her without her consent. I could send them to prison for decades. I was about to turn and leave when I heard a sound that froze the blood in my veins. The front door downstairs opened. I checked my watch. It had only been 20 minutes. They shouldn't be back for hours. Then I heard the distinct, sharp click of high heels on the foyer marble. It wasn't Gavin. It was Patricia. Damn it, I heard her voice echo up the stairs, shrill and annoyed. I forgot the power of attorney forms. Gavin is going to kill me if we are late. I looked around the room. There was no other exit. The balcony was too high to jump from without breaking a leg. The bathroom had no window. The footsteps were getting louder. Click, click, click. She was coming up the stairs. I quickly shut the medicine cabinet and wiped the counter with my sleeve to remove any fingerprints. I moved to the bedroom door hoping to slip out before she reached the landing, but I was too late. I could see the top of her head ascending the staircase through the crack in the door. She was humming to herself, a cheerful tune that made the situation even more grotesque. She was happy because she thought she was about to win. I silently backed into the room. My eyes darted around searching for a hiding place. Under the bed was too risky. She might see my boots. The curtains were sheer. The footsteps reached the hallway. She was walking straight toward the master bedroom. I dove into the walk-in closet, pulling the louvered doors shut just as the bedroom door handle turned. I pressed myself into the corner behind a row of Gavin's expensive suits. The smell of cedar and mothballs filled my nose, but it couldn't mask the scent of my own fear. Not fear for myself, but fear of failing Sarah. If she found me here now, the game was over. They would destroy the evidence. They would move Sarah. I would never see my daughter again. The bedroom door opened. Where did he put that folder? Patricia muttered to herself. I watched through the slats of the closet door. She walked into the room, her back to me. She was less than 10 feet away. She threw her purse on the bed and walked toward the desk I had just broken into. If she noticed the lock was picked, or if she saw that the papers were slightly out of order, she would scream. I held my breath, my hand instinctively going to the pocket where the stolen pills lay hidden. I was a trapped animal, and the hunter was standing right in front of my den. Patricia reached for the drawer handle. I tensed my muscles, ready to burst out and fight my way to freedom if necessary. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own pulse pounding in my ears. She pulled the drawer open. This was it, the moment of truth. I pressed myself deeper into the corner of the closet, the wool of Gavin's suits scratching against my cheek. Through the wooden slats of the door, I watched Patricia's silhouette freeze. She had pulled the drawer open, but she was not looking at the files. Her hand was hovering over her phone, which was resting on the desktop. It began to vibrate, buzzing angrily against the mahogany. She snatched it up, and her voice, usually dripping with fake sweetness, dropped to a low, venomous hiss. "Gavin, I am looking for the papers now," she said, pacing the room. Her heels clicked sharply on the floor, each step bringing her closer to the closet where I was hiding. "But listen to me. We have a problem. The old man. He is asking questions." I held my breath. My lungs burned, but I did not dare exhale. She was 3 feet away. If she reached out to grab a jacket, it was over. "He was sniffing around the kitchen earlier," Patricia continued, "and I saw him looking at Sarah's arms. He knows something is wrong. I do not like it, Gavin. He is not just a gardener. There is a look in his eyes. It is too sharp." She paused, listening to whatever my son-in-law was saying on the other end. Then she laughed, a cold, dry sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Do not be naive. We cannot just fire him. If he goes to the police with what he has seen, it delays the sale. We need a permanent solution. Old men have accidents all the time, Gavin. They slip in the shower. They fall downstairs. They have heart attacks in their sleep. Just think about it. If he is not gone by Friday, I will handle it myself." She hung up and threw the phone onto the bed. She grabbed the folder from the desk, not bothering to check the other contents, and stormed out of the room. I waited until I heard her footsteps fade down the hallway. I waited until I heard the front door slam shut. Only then did I let the air escape my lungs in a ragged gasp. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from a cold, hard realization. They were not just going to sell my house. They were going to kill me. I was a loose end, a stain on their perfect plan, and they were ready to scrub me out. I slipped out of the closet and moved to the window. Down below, I saw Patricia get into her car and speed off. The house was empty save for the staff and Sarah locked in the basement. I wanted to run down there and break her out right now. But I couldn't. Not yet. If I took her now with no legal standing and no police support, they would hunt us down. They would claim I kidnapped her. I needed the law on my side. I needed a weapon heavier than a wrench. I grabbed my laptop bag from the shed and slipped out the side gate. I could not use the internet connection in the house. Gavin would be monitoring the traffic, and if he saw an encrypted email going to a high-profile law firm, he would know the game was up. I needed to be a ghost. I walked 3 miles to the downtown area, keeping my head down, pulling my cap low. I blended in with the invisible people of the city, the homeless and the forgotten. I found a rundown internet cafe tucked between a pawn shop and a liquor store. It was a place for gamers and tourists smelling of stale coffee and ozone. Perfect. I paid cash for a terminal in the back corner. The computer was old, the keyboard sticky, but it had a connection. I plugged in a secure USB drive, booting the machine into a protected operating system that left no trace on the hard drive. I opened a secure email client. I did not type a subject line. I just typed a destination address. It was a private server for Sterling and Associates, the most ruthless litigation firm in the state. Arthur Sterling was my oldest friend, the man who had helped me bury my competitors in the 90s. But I had not spoken to him in 15 years. I attached the photos of the court documents. I attached the audio file of Patricia threatening Sarah, and I attached a photo of the pills I had stolen. Then I typed a simple message. Code Phoenix. The eagle has landed, but the nest is full of vipers. I am alive. I am in Los Angeles, and I need you to unleash hell. I hit send. I sat there watching the progress bar crawl across the screen. 90%. 99%. Sent. I leaned back in the creaky chair, my eyes scanning the cafe. A teenager was playing a shooter game 2 rows over. A man was sleeping at another desk. No one looked at me. Then a window popped up on my screen. It was an incoming video call request. Secure line. I plugged in my headset. I clicked accept. The screen flickered and a face appeared. It was an older man with silver hair and eyes that looked like they had seen everything. He was sitting in a corner office with a view of the city skyline, a skyline I had helped build. Arthur Sterling dropped his coffee cup. I saw it shatter on his desk, coffee spilling over legal briefs, but he did not even blink. He leaned into the camera, his face pale. "Richard," he whispered. "Hello, Arthur," I said, my voice rough. "You look old." "My God," Sterling breathed. "We buried an empty casket, Richard. The State Department told us you were killed in a rebel uprising. We held a memorial. Sarah cried for weeks." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Listen to me, Arthur. I do not have much time." "Did you get the files? I got them," Sterling said, his shock instantly replaced by professional intensity. He began typing furiously on his own keyboard. "I am looking at them now. This petition for incapacitation, it is barbaric. And these pills, Richard, this is a felony." "I know," I said. "I need you to stop the sale. The closing is on Friday." Sterling stopped typing. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. "Richard, we have a problem." "What problem?" I asked. "I am the owner of Phoenix Holdings. I am giving you a direct order. Block the sale." "I cannot," Sterling said. "What do you mean you cannot? When you were declared legally dead, your assets were frozen." Sterling explained, his voice urgent. "The control of Phoenix Holdings went into a blind trust. To reactivate your authority to prove you are alive and stop Gavin from acting as the executor of the estate, you have to appear in person." "Fine," I said. "I will come to your office now." "No," Sterling cut me off. "It is not that simple. You need to appear at the First National Bank in front of the Board of Trustees to provide biometric verification and sign the resurrection clause. The earliest appointment I can get is Monday morning." "Monday." I slammed my hand on the desk, making the teenager look up. "That is 5 days away. Gavin is selling the house on Friday. I can file an emergency injunction to delay the sale," Sterling said. "But I need to file it tomorrow. And the moment I file it, Gavin will be notified. He will know you are alive, Richard. He will know you are coming for him." I went cold. Patricia's words echoed in my head. "If he is not gone by Friday, I will handle it myself. If he knows I am alive, he will kill Sarah," I said. "He will panic. He will try to erase the evidence. He won't just try to kill Sarah," Sterling said grimly. "Richard, if you walk out of that cafe, you are a walking target. Gavin has connections. If he finds out the ghost has returned, he will not let you live until Monday. You need to go underground. I cannot hide Arthur, I said, looking at the dirty floor of the cafe. I am living in his backyard. I am the only thing standing between my daughter and a lobotomy. Then you need to be careful, Sterling warned, because the moment I file this paper tomorrow morning, the clock starts ticking. You have 48 hours to keep your daughter alive until the cavalry arrives. Do not let them catch you, Richard. If they catch you, there will be no trial, just a funeral. I ended the call. The screen went black, reflecting my own tired, determined face. Monday. I had to survive until Monday. But first I had to survive tonight. I pulled my cap down, wiped the keyboard with my sleeve, and walked out into the neon-lit street. The hunter had become the hunted, but they had forgotten one thing. A man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous creature on earth. I was going back to the house, not to hide, but to set a trap. The next 48 hours were a test of patience that nearly broke me. I knew I could not just storm the house and drag Sarah out. Without her mind intact, she would be a liability in her own rescue. I needed her lucid. I needed her to be Sarah again, even if just for an hour. So I became a chemist in the darkness of my garden shed. I used a small bag of flour I had stolen from the pantry and water from the hose to roll hundreds of tiny, hard pellets. I let them dry in the sun behind the pool equipment until they were hard and white. Then, during the 20-minute window when the maid was cleaning the upstairs bathrooms, I made the switch. I emptied the bottle of Thorazine and lithium into a plastic bag and filled the container with my harmless flour pills. It was a desperate, dangerous gamble. If the withdrawal symptoms were too severe, she could have a seizure. But if I did nothing, her mind would be gone forever. I watched her like a hawk from the garden. The first day she was shaky. I saw her sweating as she swept the patio, her hands trembling so hard she dropped the broom twice. Gavin yelled at her, calling her useless, but he did not suspect the cause. He just thought her madness was deepening. But by the second afternoon, something changed. I was trimming the hedges near the kitchen window when I saw her standing at the sink. She was not staring blankly at the wall. She was looking at a photograph on the fridge, a picture of Gavin. And for the first time in years, I saw an expression on her face that was not fear. It was hatred. Pure, sharp, intelligent hatred. The fog was lifting. The poison was leaving her system. That night I waited until the house was silent. Gavin had gone out to a club, leaving Patricia snoring in the guest room. I picked the lock on the back door and crept down the hallway to the basement entrance. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a sledgehammer. I descended the stairs into the cool, damp darkness. The only light came from the crack under the door. I unlocked it quietly and pushed it open. Sarah was sitting on the edge of her cot. She was not rocking back and forth. She was sitting up straight, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When the door opened, she did not flinch. She did not whimper. She looked up and her eyes were clear. They were the blue eyes I remembered, sharp and observant, no longer glazed over by chemical suppression. "Who is there?" she whispered. Her voice was stronger, less like a child, more like a woman. "It is me, Sarah," I said softly, stepping into the dim light. She squinted, her breath catching in her throat. She stood up slowly, her legs steady. She took a step toward me, reaching out a hand as if to touch a ghost. "Dad," she choked out. The word broke me. I rushed forward and wrapped my arms around her. She collapsed against my chest, sobbing, but these were not the tears of a broken victim. They were tears of relief. She felt solid in my arms, real. "I thought you were dead," she cried into my shoulder. "They told me you died in the desert. They showed me the death certificate. They lied." I whispered, stroking her hair, which smelled of cheap soap and dampness. "They lied about everything. I am here. I am real. And I am going to get you out of here." She pulled back, suddenly gripping my arms with surprising strength. Her eyes were wide with panic. "No, you have to go," she hissed, pushing me toward the door. "You have to run, Dad. If Gavin finds you here, he will kill you. You do not understand what he is capable of." "I am not leaving you," I said firmly. "I have a plan. The lawyer is filing an injunction tomorrow. We just need to hold on." "You do not understand." Sarah shook her head frantically. "It is not just about the money anymore. It is about the baby." I froze. "What baby, Sarah? Gavin's baby," she spat the words out with disgust. "He has a mistress. Her name is Elena. She is 22. I heard them talking on the phone when they thought I was too drugged to understand. She is pregnant, Dad. She is almost 7 months along." The room seemed to spin. A mistress. A child. "That is why he is rushing the sale." Sarah continued, her voice trembling with urgency. "He needs the cash to buy a new life with her." But it is worse than that. Elena refuses to be a mistress. She wants to be his wife. But Gavin cannot divorce me because of the prenup you made him sign. If he divorces me, he gets nothing. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I had written that prenuptial agreement myself. It was ironclad. So his only option, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face again, is to make sure I can never divorce him. That is why he is filing for permanent incapacitation. If I am locked away in a state ward declared legally insane, he stays my guardian. He keeps control of the trust. He gets to live in a mansion with his new wife and baby, using my money to pay for their diapers while I rot in a padded cell until I die. The sheer evil of it took my breath away. It was not just greed. It was a systematic replacement. He was going to erase my daughter to install a new family on top of her grave. "He is a monster," I whispered. "He is desperate," Sarah said, "and that makes him dangerous." He told Elena on the phone that he would take care of the loose ends by Friday. "Dad, you are a loose end. You have to leave. Please." I gripped her shoulders. "I am not going anywhere. We are going to burn his world down, Sarah. I promise you." Suddenly, heavy footsteps thundered on the stairs above us. We both froze. The front door must have opened while we were talking. Gavin was home early. "Hide," Sarah gasped. There was nowhere to hide. The room was a concrete box. Sarah's eyes darted around, and then, in a split second, the clarity vanished from her face. She slumped her shoulders. She let her jaw go slack. She began to drool. She started rocking back and forth, humming a discordant tune. It was a transformation so instant and so convincing it was terrifying. She was putting the mask back on to save us. The door flew open. Gavin stood there, his tie undone, his face flushed with alcohol and rage. He looked at Sarah, who was now huddled in the corner, muttering nonsense about spiders in the walls. Then he saw me. I was standing in the middle of the room, holding a broom I had grabbed from the corner, in a pathetic attempt to look busy. Gavin's eyes narrowed. The air in the room grew heavy and electric. He took a step inside, blocking the only exit. He looked at the broom, then at my face, then at the time on his gold Rolex. "It is midnight, Richard," Gavin said slowly, his voice dangerously quiet. I gripped the broom handle, ready to swing it like a baseball bat if he took one more step. "I heard a noise," I said, making my voice sound old and wavering. "I thought it was a rat. I came to check." Gavin did not blink. He did not smile. He reached into his jacket pocket. For a second, I thought he was reaching for a gun. My muscles coiled, ready to spring. "What are you really doing here, old man?" Gavin asked, taking a step closer, invading my personal space. "You are not cleaning, and you are certainly not checking for rats." He leaned in, smelling of expensive scotch and cheap perfume. "You were talking to her, weren't you?" I stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had to make a choice. Attack him now and risk everything, or play the fool one last time. Sarah's life hung in the balance of my next answer. I looked at Gavin, his face twisted in a smirk that made my skin crawl. He had trapped me. If I said I was comforting her, he would claim I was manipulating a mentally incompetent woman. If I said I was checking for rats, he would call me a liar. But Gavin did not wait for my answer. He had a darker, more useful narrative in mind. He took a step back, pulling his phone from his pocket, his eyes gleaming with malicious delight. "Oh, I see what this is," Gavin said, his voice rising theatrically. He was not talking to me anymore. He was performing for an invisible audience. I hire a homeless old man out of pity. I give him a roof over his head, and this is how he repays me, by creeping into the basement in the middle of the night to prey on my sick wife. My blood ran cold. The accusation was so vile, so far from the truth, that for a moment I could not speak. Sarah let out a whimper, shrinking back against the wall, her eyes wide with terror. She understood exactly what he was doing. "You are sick!" Gavin shouted, pointing a finger at me. "Get away from her! Do not touch her! I have not touched her!" I said, my voice steady but low. I heard a noise. I came to check. "Save it for the police," Gavin spat. He was already dialing. "Yes, send a unit to the Pierce estate immediately. I have an intruder. I just caught my gardener assaulting my wife. Yes, he is still here. I have him cornered." He hung up and looked at me with a triumphant grin. "You are finished, Richard. Officer Miller is just down the road. By the time he gets here, you will be lucky if you can walk to the squad car. And do not worry about Sarah. I will make sure the doctors know she has been traumatized. It will only strengthen my case for permanent institutionalization." He was using his own lie to seal Sarah's fate. If I was arrested for assault, Sarah would be the victim, and he would be the protective husband. I would be thrown in jail, unable to stop the sale on Friday. I would lose. The sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder by the second. I looked at Sarah. She was shaking her head slightly, mouthing the word "run." But I could not run. I was 70 years old. I could not outrun a police cruiser. I needed a different kind of escape. I needed to leave this house, but I could not go to jail. The heavy boots of Officer Miller and his partner thundered down the stairs. They burst into the room, guns drawn. "Hands! Let me see your hands!" Miller screamed. I raised my hands slowly. Gavin stepped forward, playing the victim perfectly. "Thank God you are here," Gavin gasped. He was all over her. I heard screaming. I came down and found him on top of her. It was a lie so bold it took my breath away. Miller looked at me with disgust. He did not ask for my side of the story. He did not look for evidence. He just saw a dirty old man and a wealthy donor. "Get on the ground," Miller barked, advancing on me with handcuffs. I knew that once those cuffs clicked shut, I was dead. I would disappear into the system or have an accident in a holding cell. I needed to get out of their custody. I needed a medical evacuation. I took a deep breath, recalling the symptoms of the angina attacks my father used to suffer. I clenched my left hand into a fist. I let my face go slack. I grabbed my chest with my right hand, letting out a strangled gasp. My heart, I wheezed, stumbling forward. I cannot breathe. I collapsed onto the cold concrete floor, letting my body spasm. It was a performance, but the fear I felt for Sarah made the sweat on my brow very real. "He is faking it," Gavin yelled, kicking my leg. "Get up, you old actor!" But Officer Miller hesitated. He was corrupt, but he was not ready to explain a death in custody on his watch, especially with a suspect this old. I let my eyes roll back in my head. I made my breathing shallow and ragged. "Call the paramedics," Miller's partner said, holstering his gun and kneeling beside me. "His pulse is racing. He is going into cardiac arrest." "No," Gavin screamed. "Just arrest him." "We cannot book a corpse," Mr. Pierce Miller snapped, grabbing his radio. "Dispatch, we need an ambulance at the Pierce residence. Possible myocardial infarction. Suspect is elderly male." Gavin let out a string of curses, kicking the wall in frustration. He knew he was losing control of the situation. He wanted me in a cell, not a hospital. 10 minutes later, I was strapped to a gurney, an oxygen mask over my face. As they wheeled me out of the basement, I turned my head to the side. I saw Sarah. She was still huddled in the corner, but for a brief second, she lowered her hands. She looked at me and I winked. Just a tiny, almost imperceptible flutter of my eyelid. She understood. I was not dying. I was fighting. The ambulance ride was a blur of lights and sirens. The paramedics were professionals sticking IVs into my arm and monitoring my vitals. I kept my eyes closed, regulating my breathing, playing the part of the fading old man. "Take him to County General," the driver shouted. "He is indigent. No insurance, a County General, perfect." It was an overcrowded, underfunded public hospital on the other side of the city. It was chaotic. It was the perfect place to disappear. When we arrived, the emergency room was a war zone. People were shouting. Gurneys were everywhere, and doctors were running from one crisis to another. The paramedics wheeled me into a curtained bay and hooked me up to a monitor. "Doctor will be here in 5 minutes," the nurse said, patting my hand before rushing off to help a gunshot victim. The moment the curtain closed, I sat up. I ripped the IV out of my arm, pressing my thumb over the puncture wound to stop the bleeding. I pulled the sensors off my chest. The heart monitor flatlined, letting out a high-pitched whine. I did not wait for them to come running. I slid off the bed, my legs steady. I grabbed a doctor's lab coat that had been left on a chair and shrugged it on over my dirty gardener's clothes. I walked out of the bay, moving with purpose, looking at a clipboard I had snatched from the counter. "Code blue in Bay 4, someone shouted behind me. Nurses rushed past me toward my empty bed. I walked in the opposite direction toward the fire exit. I pushed through the heavy doors and stepped out into the cool night air. I was in an alleyway filled with dumpsters. I was free. I stripped off the lab coat and tossed it into a bin. I walked 2 blocks until I found a payphone that actually worked. I did not have coins, but I had a calling card number memorized from my days in the field. I dialed. It rang 3 times. "Sterling," the voice answered, sounding tired. "It is me," I said, leaning against the brick wall, watching the city lights of Los Angeles glitter in the distance. Richard Sterling's voice spiked with panic. "Where are you?" The police scanner said there was an incident at the house. They said a suspect had a heart attack. "I am fine," I said, wiping the sweat from my forehead. "It was a diversion." "But I am out of time, Arthur." Gavin tried to frame me. "He is desperate. He is going to hurt her." "We filed the injunction," Sterling said. "But the court won't review it until tomorrow morning." "That is too late," I said. I looked up at the sky. The moon was full, casting a pale light over the city where I had built my fortune. I was done playing by the rules. I was done hiding in sheds and pretending to be weak. "I want you to activate Operation Phoenix," Wise said. My voice was cold, hard as steel. Sterling went silent. "Richard, are you sure that is the nuclear option? It liquidates your offshore holdings. It exposes you completely." "I do not care," I said. "Gavin owes money. Big money. He told his buyer he needed to sell the house to pay off his debts. Find out who holds his paper." "I already looked into it," Sterling said. "He is leveraged to the hilt. He owes $5 million to a private equity firm in Singapore, and another $2 million to a loan shark in Vegas." "Buy it," I commanded. "Buy all of it. Offer them a 20% premium for immediate transfer of the debt. I want to own every cent that man owes. Richard." "That will cost you." "Do it." I roared into the phone, startling a stray cat in the alley. "I do not care what it costs. I want to own him. By sunrise, I want to be the one holding the leash." "I understand," Sterling said, his voice shifting to a professional tone. "I will wake up the partners. We will have the debt purchased by 4 a.m. "Good," I said. "And Arthur?" "Get the car. Come pick me up." I am done being the gardener. It is time for the landlord to return. I hung up the phone. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the smoggy air. I touched the pocket where the stolen pills were still hidden. Gavin thought he had won. He thought he had scared off a helpless old man. He had no idea that he had just forced me to take the gloves off. I was coming back. And this time I was not coming through the back door. The next 36 hours were a masterclass in arrogance. Gavin moved through the house like a king who had just executed his only rival. He thought I was rotting in a hospital bed or dead in a ditch, so he dropped his guard. He tore down the last of my paintings, replacing them with modern monstrosities that suited his hollow soul. He called in a cleaning crew to scrub the basement, erasing the traces of Sarah's prison, preparing for the grand showing. But he did not know that the cleaning crew worked for me. Every rag they used, every bottle of bleach was a prop. They were planting high-definition microphones in every room, turning his sanctuary into a broadcast studio. I sat in the back of a black surveillance van parked 3 streets away, watching the monitors. The screens glowed with the cold light of justice. Next to me sat Arthur Sterling, looking more like a general than a lawyer, coordinating with a team of forensic accountants who were dissecting Gavin's financial corpse in real time. "He is moving fast," Sterling noted, pointing to the screen. "The buyer is here." I watched as a sleek black sedan pulled up to the gate. A man stepped out. He looked every bit the wealthy international investor Gavin was desperate for. His name was Mr. Black. In reality, he was an ex-intelligence operative who owed me his life from a botched extraction in Beirut 10 years ago. He was the perfect bait. Gavin greeted him with a smile that was too wide, too eager. He led Mr. Black through the foyer, his hands gesturing wildly as he spun lies about the property's history. "And this," Gavin said, sweeping his arm across the living room, "is the heart of the estate. We have had some minor issues with staff recently, an old gardener who lost his mind, but as you can see, I have cleaned up the trash. The house is pristine." Mr. Black nodded, his face impassive. "And the title, I understand there might be complications with the trust." Gavin laughed, a nervous barking sound. "Complications? Not at all. My wife is indisposed. But I have full power of attorney. In fact, I have the final signatures ready for you today. We can close this deal right now." My heart tightened as I watched them move to the study. Gavin opened the door and called out, "Sarah, get in here." The camera angle shifted. I saw my daughter. She was sitting in a chair in the corner, looking worse than I had ever seen her. Gavin had evidently forced the drugs back into her system the moment I was gone. Her head lolled to the side, her eyes struggling to focus. She looked like a broken doll. Gavin walked over to her, his movements sharp and aggressive. He shoved a pen into her hand. "Sign here, honey," he said, his voice dripping with fake sweetness that barely masked his impatience. "Just like we practiced. Mr. Black needs to see you sign." Sarah's hand trembled. She dropped the pen. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. Gavin's face contorted. He forgot about the buyer. He forgot about the facade. He grabbed Sarah by the back of the neck, squeezing hard. "Pick it up," he hissed, his back to Mr. Black, thinking his body blocked the view. But my camera hidden in the bookshelf saw everything. "You useless junkie. Pick it up and sign, or I swear I will send you to the place with the padded walls tonight." Sarah whimpered, fumbling for the pen. She managed to grip it, her knuckles white. She scrawled something on the paper. It was barely legible, but it was a signature. There, Gavin beamed, snatching the paper away and turning back to Mr. Black as if nothing had happened. "Signed, sealed, and delivered. The house is yours, Mr. Black. 4.5 million. Transfer to the Cayman account." As discussed, Mr. Black took the paper, inspecting it slowly. He looked at Gavin, then at the terrified woman in the corner. "This seems in order," Mr. Black said calmly. "I will initiate the transfer." Gavin practically vibrated with greed. He poured 2 glasses of scotch, his hands shaking with excitement. He thought he had won. He thought he was minutes away from freedom from his mistress, from his new life. I watched the screen, my hand hovering over the radio button. Sterling looked at me. "Do we move in?" Sterling asked. "We have the assault on tape. We have the coerced signature. That is kidnapping, fraud, and elder abuse." "Not yet," I said, my eyes locked on Gavin's smiling face. "Let him think the money has cleared. Let him feel the victory. I want him to be at the very top of the mountain before I kick him off." Gavin raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he toasted. "To justice," Mr. Black replied, taking a sip. Suddenly, Gavin's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, expecting a bank notification. His smile faltered. He frowned, tapping the screen. "That is odd," Gavin muttered. "The transfer, it says denied. Insufficient funds, that is impossible. Mr. Black, are you sure your bank is—" Mr. Black set his glass down. "My bank is fine, Mr. Pierce. The problem is not my funds. It is your destination account. It seems to be frozen." What Gavin laughed, a high-pitched sound of panic. "That is ridiculous. I just checked it this morning." I leaned into the microphone. It was time. "Hold position," I told the tactical team waiting outside the gate. "Wait for the scream." Gavin was frantically typing on his phone now. "Why is it frozen? Who froze it?" "Maybe you should ask the owner of the bank." Mr. Black suggested checking his watch. "I do not know the owner of the bank," Gavin shouted, losing all composure. "Oh, but you do," Mr. Black said, his voice dropping to a low, cold tone. "In fact, I believe you tried to have him arrested for a heart attack last night." Gavin froze. He looked up from his phone, his face draining of all color. He looked at Mr. Black, then at the empty doorway, and finally he looked directly into the hidden camera in the bookshelf, as if he could feel my eyes burning through the lens. "No," Gavin whispered. "That is impossible. He is a gardener. He is a nobody." Sterling signaled the team. "The game is over," I said into the radio. "Let's go home." I stepped out of the van, adjusting the cuffs of my suit. It felt good to be wearing my own clothes again. It felt good to be Richard Caldwell, the architect, the builder, the father. I walked toward the house, not sneaking through the shadows this time, but walking right up the middle of the driveway. The gates opened for me. The security guards, now replaced by my own men, stood at attention. I could hear Gavin shouting inside the house. He was unraveling. The trap had snapped shut, and he was thrashing against the steel teeth of his own greed. But he had not just stolen money. He had stolen years of my daughter's life. And for that there would be no settlement. There would only be a reckoning. I reached the front door and placed my hand on the handle. It was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped into the arena. The atmosphere inside the living room was electric, vibrating with the hum of expensive conversation and the clinking of crystal glasses. Gavin had turned the signing of a property deed into a coronation. He had invited the local press, posing for photos with a shovel, as if breaking ground on a new era of prosperity, while the real foundation of this family lay shivering in the dark beneath his feet. He stood by the fireplace, the flames casting long shadows across his face, which was flushed with the intoxicating mix of scotch and victory. "I have big plans for this community," Gavin announced to a reporter from the city. Chronicle, his voice booming with false modesty. "Selling this estate is just the first step. We are looking at a future where innovation meets tradition. And frankly, it is a relief to finally move on from the past." He raised his glass, and the room followed suit. "To the future," he bellowed. "To the future," the guests echoed, oblivious to the fact that their host's future was currently being dismantled wire by the man they thought was dead. Down in the basement, the air was cold and stale. Patricia sat on a folding chair outside the heavy oak door, scrolling through her phone, checking real estate listings in Monaco. She had no idea that the silence from the other side of the door was not submission. It was the calm before the storm. Sarah was awake. She was listening. And for the first time in years, she was waiting for a signal she knew was coming. Outside, the gravel of the driveway crunched under the tires of 4 black armored SUVs. We did not use the siren. We did not need to announce our arrival with noise. Power whispers. We rolled up to the front steps in a formation that screamed military precision. The lead car, a custom Mercedes that cost more than Gavin's entire life insurance policy, came to a smooth halt. I sat in the back seat, adjusting the cuffs of my navy blue Brioni suit. It had been waiting in a climate-controlled storage unit for 15 years, along with the rest of my life. It fit as if I had never left. I caught my reflection in the darkened window. The dirt was gone. The stubble was shaved. The hunched shoulders of the broken gardener were replaced by the steel spine of the CEO. "Ready?" Sir Sterling asked from the seat beside me. He looked nervous but determined. I did not answer. I just opened the door. The sound of the heavy car doors slamming shut in unison cut through the night like a volley of gunfire. The private security guards Gavin had hired, cheap rent-a-cops looking for an easy paycheck, stepped forward, hands on their belts. "Hey," one of them shouted, shining a flashlight at us. "You cannot park here. This is a private event. Turn around or we will—" He stopped mid-sentence as 4 of my personal security detail stepped out of the flanking vehicles. These were not mall cops. These were former Special Forces operatives, men who had guarded me in war zones. They did not speak. They simply formed a wall, their presence alone enough to make Gavin's guards take a step back, lowering their flashlights in sudden instinctive deference. I walked up the stone steps, my Italian leather shoes clicking rhythmically on the path I had laid with my own hands 20 years ago. I reached the massive double doors. I did not knock. 2 of my men pushed them open, the heavy wood groaning as if welcoming its true master home. The noise of the party spilled out, then died instantly. I stepped into the foyer. The light from the crystal chandelier hit me, and for a moment I was blinded. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw them. The sea of faces turned toward the door. The laughter died in their throats. The music seemed to screech to a halt. For a few seconds, no one recognized me. They saw a powerful, imposing man in a suit that whispered old money. They were confused. Was this a new investor? A surprise guess, then Gavin turned around. He was in the middle of a laugh, his head thrown back. He froze. The glass of scotch in his hand tilted amber liquid spilling onto his expensive rug, but he did not notice. He stared at me. His eyes went wide, not with recognition, but with a primal, impossible cognitive dissonance. His brain could not reconcile the image of the dirty, pathetic gardener he had kicked earlier with the Titan standing before him. "Who the hell are you?" Gavin demanded, his voice cracking. "This is a private party." "Security, where is the security?" No one moved. My men had already secured the perimeter of the room, standing silently against the walls, arms crossed. I did not speak to him, not yet. I walked through the crowd. The guests parted for me like the Red Sea, sensing the sheer force of gravity pulling the room toward me. I walked past the reporter who was now frantically snapping photos. I walked past Mr. Black, who gave me a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. I reached the center of the room where a microphone stand had been set up for Gavin's speeches. I stood there for a moment looking around the room. I looked at the paintings Gavin had hung, gaudy, soulless, abstract pieces. I looked at the furniture he had bought, trendy, uncomfortable chairs that would be out of style in a year. He had tried to erase me. He had failed. Gavin stumbled forward, his face turning a blotchy shade of purple. I said, "Who are you?" he screamed, losing all control. "You think you can just walk in here? Do you know who I am?" I looked at him then. I looked him dead in the eye, and I let a small, cold smile touch my lips. "I know exactly who you are, Gavin," I said. my voice amplified by the speakers deep and resonant, filling every corner of the house. "You are a tenant, and your lease has just expired." Gavin blinked. He squinted. And then the realization hit him like a physical blow. He saw the eyes. The same eyes that had looked at him from the face of the old man in the garden. The same eyes that had watched him from the shadows for days. "No," Gavin whispered, backing away, shaking his head. "No. That is impossible. You are the gardener. You are dead." I reached out and adjusted the microphone. I took a slow breath, savoring the terror radiating from him. "I am sorry to interrupt your toast," I said calmly to the room, my voice steady as bedrock. "But I believe there has been a misunderstanding. This man is trying to sell a house that does not belong to him." Gavin lunged forward, panic overriding his senses. "Shut up," he shrieked. "Get him out of here. He is an imposter. He is crazy." I did not flinch. I did not move. Actually, I continued, my eyes never leaving his face. "I am Richard Caldwell, and I am here to take back my home." Gavin's shock lasted only a second before it curdled into a manic, desperate laughter that echoed uncomfortably off the high ceilings. He looked at the stunned guests, then at the camera crews, and finally back at me, his eyes wide with the frantic energy of a rat cornered in a trap. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the crumpled legal documents he had been waving around all evening, the paper shield he believed made him invincible. "You are insane," Gavin shouted, holding the papers up to the light, so everyone could see the official seals. "This is a performance. A sad, pathetic performance by a man who abandoned his family decades ago. You want to talk about the law? Fine. Let us talk about the law." He slammed his hand onto the podium, the sound amplifying through the speakers with a harsh thud. "This is a court order," Gavin declared, his voice rising to a shrill pitch. "It grants me full, uncontested conservatorship over Sarah Caldwell and all her assets. I am her legal guardian. I am the only one who can make decisions for this estate. And you are a trespasser. You are a ghost. You have no rights here. You are nothing." He turned to the police officers who were standing near the entrance, confused and waiting for orders. "Officers, remove this man immediately. He is harassing a mentally incompetent woman and disrupting a legal commercial transaction. Do your jobs." For a moment, the room held its breath. Gavin's confidence was convincing. He had the paperwork. He had the narrative. The guests began to murmur, looking at me with suspicion. Perhaps I was just a crazy old man with a borrowed suit and hired muscle. But I did not move. I did not shout back. I simply nodded to Arthur Sterling. Sterling stepped forward, opening his briefcase with the precise, lethal calm of an executioner. He pulled out a single sheet of paper, not a thick file like Gavin's, but a document with a red medical stamp at the top. "That court order is based on a medical diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia and drug addiction," Sterling said, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a knife. "It relies entirely on the premise that Sarah Caldwell is mentally unfit to manage her own life." "She is unfit," Gavin yelled, sweat pouring down his forehead. "She is crazy, everyone knows it." Sterling held up the paper. At 6 o'clock this morning, while the household was asleep, a sample of Sarah's blood was collected and rushed to an independent forensic lab. We just received the results. Gavin's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "Sarah is not schizophrenic," Sterling announced, turning to face the reporters, ensuring every word was recorded. "And she is not an addict. Her blood shows toxic levels of thorazine and lithium, specifically 10 times the maximum safe dosage for a human being. She has not been losing her mind, Mr. Pierce. She has been systematically poisoned." The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Poisoned. The guests gasped. The reporter from the City Chronicle stopped taking notes and stared at Gavin with open horror. "That is a lie," Gavin screamed, but his voice cracked. He looked at the guests, pleading for validation. She takes vitamins. I give her vitamins. We found the bottle, Sterling continued relentlessly. Hidden in your bathroom, mixed in with the supplements. This document proves that the conservatorship was obtained through fraud and criminal negligence. It is not just void, Gavin. It is evidence in an attempted murder trial. Gavin looked around the room, seeing his support evaporate. The admiration in the eyes of his peers was replaced by disgust. He was losing the audience. He was losing the moral high ground. But Gavin was a survivor, a cockroach who could survive a nuclear blast if there was money involved. He stiffened his spine, wiping the sweat from his upper lip. He looked at me with pure hatred. Fine, Gavin spat, adjusting his tie with trembling hands. Sue me. Drag me to court. It will take years. I will hire the best defense team in the state. But right now, that does not change a thing about today. He turned to Mr. Black, who was still standing by the table with the signed deed. The deed is signed, Gavin said, a frantic smile stretching across his face. The transaction is complete. The money has already been wired. I checked the confirmation myself. The house is sold. The cash is in my offshore account. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You can take the house back when I am dead, old man. But the $4.5 million, that is mine. And with that kind of money, I can disappear to a place where your lawyers will never find me. He grabbed his phone, tapping the banking app furiously. Look, Gavin shouted, holding the screen up for Mr. Black to see. Transfer initiated. It is done. I am rich. I am leaving. He started to back away towards the French doors, clutching his phone like a lifeline. Mr. Black cleared his throat. It was a polite sound, but it stopped Gavin in his tracks. Actually, Mr. Pierce, there is a small detail you overlooked, Mr. Black said. Gavin spun around. What? What detail? The money is there. The money was sent, yes, Mr. Black said, smoothing his jacket. But it never reached your account in the Caymans. It was intercepted. Intercepted. Gavin laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. By who? The FBI. I have not been charged with anything yet. You cannot freeze my assets without a warrant. It was not the government, Mr. Black said calmly. It was the bank. You see, when a large transfer hits an account that has outstanding liens against it, the bank has a fiduciary duty to seize those funds to pay off the debts. Debts! Gavin screamed, his eyes bulging. I do not have debts. I paid off the cars. I paid off the credit cards. I am clean, Mr. Black picked up a file from the table. According to the Central Credit Registry, you have a $5 million outstanding loan with a private equity firm in Singapore. A high-risk loan you took out 3 years ago to cover your gambling losses in Macau. You defaulted on that loan 6 months ago. The interest has been compounding daily. Gavin froze. The color drained from his face so completely he looked like a corpse standing upright. He remembered the loan. He had buried it deep, hoping they would forget, hoping he could pay it off with the house sale before they came for his knees. That is private, Gavin stammered. How do you know about that? And even if I owe them, they are in Singapore. They cannot touch a transfer in America instantly. They can if the debt was sold, Mr. Black said. Sold, Gavin whispered. Last night at 3 a.m., that entire debt portfolio was purchased by a U.S.-based trust, Mr. Black explained. They bought your debt, Mr. Pierce, every single cent of it. And as the new creditor, they exercised their right to seize any incoming assets to satisfy the lien. The $4.5 million from the house sale did not go to you. It went directly to pay off the principal of the loan you owe. Gavin dropped his phone. It hit the rug with a dull thud. You are lying, he breathed. Who bought it? Who would spend $5 million just to bankrupt me? I stepped forward then. The room fell silent again. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and Gavin's ragged breathing. I walked right up to him, close enough to smell the fear radiating off his skin. I leaned in, invading his space, forcing him to look into the eyes of the man he had tried to erase. I lowered my voice to a whisper, intimate and terrifying, meant only for him and the microphone that picked up every syllable. You really should read the fine print, Gavin. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a business card. It was heavy stock, embossed with gold lettering. I tucked it into the breast pocket of his jacket, right over his pounding heart. The entity that bought your debt is a subsidiary of a global financial group, I said softly. A group called the Caldwell Trust. Gavin stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Caldwell, but that is your name. I smiled, cold and sharp as a razor. I am not just the gardener, Gavin, and I am not just Sarah's father. I am the chairman of the board. You did not borrow money from a stranger in Singapore. You borrowed it from my bank. You tried to sell my house to my associate using my money to pay off a debt that you now owe to me. I took a step back, straightening my tie. You are not rich, Gavin. You are not free. You are broke. You are $500,000 short of settling your debt to me. And since you cannot pay, I gestured to the police officers who were now moving forward, handcuffs at the ready, realizing exactly who was in charge. I believe that makes you a flight risk. Gavin looked at the police, then at the empty spot where his future used to be. He let out a scream of pure animalistic despair, a sound of a man who had reached for the stars and fallen into a pit of his own making. But I did not feel pity. I looked past him towards the basement door, where I could hear the faint sound of weeping turning into laughter. The checkmate was complete, but I was not done yet. There was still one person left to deal with. The silence in the room was shattered not by applause, but by the sound of heavy boots hitting the marble floor. But it was not the local police who moved in. Officer Miller and his partner, who had been ready to arrest me moments ago, suddenly found themselves outflanked. A team of officers in crisp dark uniforms, emblazoned with the state police insignia, marched through the front door, pushing past the confused security guards. They were not here for a domestic dispute. They were here for a federal investigation into wire fraud, kidnapping, and the illegal administration of controlled substances. Officer Miller stepped back, his hand hovering over his holster, his face pale. He knew instantly that his jurisdiction had just been overruled by a power far greater than Gavin's checkbook. The lead state trooper walked straight up to Gavin, who was still trembling by the fireplace. Gavin Pierce, the trooper, announced, his voice booming through the silent room. You are under arrest. Gavin looked at the handcuffs, then at the guests, and finally at me. The reality of his situation crashed down on him. The arrogance that had sustained him for years evaporated, leaving behind a pathetic, shivering coward. He did not run. He did not fight. He collapsed. He fell to his knees, sliding down the front of the fireplace, clutching the hem of my trousers. Richard. Please, Gavin sobbed, tears streaming down his face, ruining his expensive silk tie. You cannot let them take me. I am family. I am your son. I looked down at him. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity. Just the cold, clinical detachment of a surgeon removing a tumor. I have no son, I said. It was her, Gavin screamed, pointing a shaking finger towards the basement door. It was Patricia. She made me do it. She told me you were dead. She got the drugs. She said we had to sell the house before the baby came. I just wanted to be a good husband. I am a victim here, Richard. Please. The guests gasped. Even in his final moments, Gavin was willing to throw his own mother to the wolves to save his skin. It was a display of character so vile, it made the air in the room feel heavy. I leaned down, bringing my face close to his. You are not a victim, Gavin. You are a predator who got caught. You made my daughter, the woman you vowed to protect, scrub this driveway with a toothbrush while you drank scotch and laughed. You treated a princess like a slave in her own castle. I stood up, signaling the troopers to take him. Well, I hope you enjoyed the view from the top, I said, my voice hard as iron. Because where you are going, the only view you will have is the concrete floor. And trust me, you will be scrubbing that floor with your tongue before the other inmates are done with you. Get him out of my sight." 2 troopers hauled Gavin to his feet. He was screaming now, a high-pitched, animalistic sound of pure terror. As they dragged him towards the door, another commotion erupted from the hallway. 2 more officers emerged from the basement stairs. Between them, they dragged Patricia. She was not going quietly. She was kicking and spitting, her evening gown torn, her hair wild. She looked like a banshee. "Get your hands off me!" Patricia shrieked. "Do you know who I am? I am a pillar of this community. My son will sue you, Gavin." "Gavin, tell them." She looked around the room, searching for her savior, but she only saw Gavin being shoved into the back of a police van outside. Her eyes locked onto mine. She stopped screaming. She stared at me with a hatred that could burn through steel. "You old fool," she hissed. "You think you have won. She is broken, Richard. You are rescuing a shell. We destroyed her mind. She will never be normal again." I walked up to her. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. "She is a Caldwell, Patricia. We do not break, we rebuild. And as for you, you will have a long time to think about your mistake in a cell that is smaller than the closet you forced my daughter to sleep in." "Take her away," I commanded. As the police dragged the screaming woman out the front door, the flashbulbs of the press cameras exploded like fireworks. The reporters, sensing the story of the decade, were shouting questions, capturing every moment of the Pierce family's downfall. The neighbors who had watched silently for years, as Sarah withered away, now stood on their lawns watching the spectacle with a mix of shock and vindication. But I did not watch them leave. My work up here was done. The most important task remained. I turned my back on the party, on the guests, on the chaos. I walked to the basement door. My security team held the crowd back, giving me a wide berth. I opened the heavy oak door and descended the stairs. The air grew cooler with every step. The smell of damp concrete and fear hit me. I reached the bottom landing and pushed open the door to the small, windowless room. Sarah was huddled in the corner, her hands over her ears, to block out the noise from upstairs. She was shaking violently. She was still wearing the maid's uniform, stained and torn. When the door opened, she curled into a tighter ball, expecting another beating, expecting Patricia to come back with the belt. "Please," she whimpered. "I did not mean to drop the pen. Please do not hurt me." I fell to my knees on the hard floor. I did not care about the $3,000 suit. I crawled towards her. "Sarah," I whispered. She froze. She slowly lowered her hands. She turned her head, her eyes wide and terrified. She looked at me, but she did not see the dirty gardener in the cap. She saw the man in the suit. She saw the father she remembered from 15 years ago, the giant who used to carry her on his shoulders. "Dad," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "It is over, baby," I said, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. "The bad people are gone. They can never hurt you again." She stared at me, trying to process the reality. She reached out a trembling hand and touched the lapel of my jacket. She touched my face, tracing the tears. "You came back," she sobbed, a sound of pure heart-wrenching relief. "You really came back." "I promised I would," I said, pulling her into my arms. I lifted her up, cradling her on like she was a child again. She buried her face in my neck, weeping uncontrollably, her thin body shaking against mine. I stood up, holding my daughter, my greatest treasure. I carried her out of that dungeon. I carried her up the stairs, one step at a time, leaving the darkness behind us forever. When we emerged into the living room, the silence returned. The guests watched with tears in their eyes. Mr. Black bowed his head in respect. I did not stop. I walked straight out the front door into the cool night air. The police cars were pulling away, their red and blue lights painting the driveway where Sarah had scrubbed just hours before. Gavin's face was pressed against the window of the squad car, watching us. He looked at Sarah safe in my arms, and for the first time he understood the magnitude of his defeat. I walked past the press, ignoring their microphones. I walked to the waiting limousine where Arthur Sterling was holding the door open. I placed Sarah gently in the back seat. She looked out the window at the house, at the flashing lights, at the neighbors cheering. "Is it real?" she asked, looking up at me. I took her hand and kissed it. "It is real, Sarah. And tomorrow, we are going to start building something new." I signaled the driver. The car pulled away, leaving the nightmare of the Bel Air estate in the rearview mirror. The punishment had been delivered. The rescue was complete. But the healing was just beginning. And as I looked at my daughter finally sleeping peacefully against my shoulder, I knew that was a project I would happily spend the rest of my life working on. The wheels of justice turn slowly, they say. But when you grease them with undeniable evidence and the best legal team money can buy, they can move with terrifying speed. The trial of Gavin Pierce was not a media circus. It was an execution. There were no plea deals. There was no mercy. The video footage of him abusing Sarah, the toxicology reports, proving the poisoning, and the financial records of his fraud painted a picture so black that even his own defense attorney looked ashamed to sit next to him. When the judge read the verdict, Gavin did not scream. He did not cry. He simply slumped in his chair, a man who had built a castle on sand watching the tide finally come in. 25 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole. Patricia received 15 years as an accomplice. As the bailiffs led them away, Gavin looked back one last time. He searched the gallery for me, perhaps looking for a hint of forgiveness. But I was not looking at him. I was looking at my daughter, who was sitting beside me, her head held high, finally free from the shadow of the monster who had stolen her life. 6 months have passed since the flashing lights faded from our driveway. The Bel Air estate is no longer a cold, sterile museum of vanity. We stripped the walls of the gray modern art Gavin favored and painted them in warm, vibrant colors. We tore up the marble floors in the kitchen, where Sarah had been forced to eat scraps, and replaced them with hand-scraped oak that feels warm under bare feet. The basement, once a dungeon of despair, has been completely sealed off. We do not go down there. Instead, we built a new studio in the garden, a space filled with light and air where Sarah paints. And Sarah. To see her now is to witness a miracle. The gaunt, terrified woman who scrubbed the driveway with a toothbrush is gone. In her place is a woman who glows with health. She has gained weight, her cheeks are rosy, and her eyes possess a sparkle that I thought was extinguished forever. She did not just survive, she thrived. She took the pain of her past and forged it into a weapon to protect others. She now runs the Open Door Foundation, a charity we established together to provide legal and financial aid to victims of domestic and financial abuse. Every day she sits at the head of the table in our dining room, not as a servant, but as a leader helping other women reclaim their voices, just as she reclaimed hers. I sit here on the porch, nursing a cup of coffee, watching her work in the garden. She is laughing at something one of her volunteers said. The sound of her laughter is the most beautiful music I have ever heard, sweeter than any applause I ever received for a skyscraper or a bridge. For 40 years, I traveled the globe chasing contracts and building monuments of steel and glass. I told myself I was doing it for her to build a legacy. But in my pursuit of the future, I almost lost the present. I missed the warning signs. I trusted the wrong people because I was too busy looking at blueprints to look at the hearts of the men I let into our lives. I am not going back to Dubai. I am not going back to Qatar. The skyscrapers can be built by younger men. My construction site is here now. My project is making sure that my daughter never feels a moment of fear again. I have traded my hard hat for a sun hat and my blueprints for a book, and I have never been happier. I realized that the greatest structure a man can build is not made of concrete, but of trust and presence. It has been exactly 1 year since the judge banged his gavel, and the air in Los Angeles feels different today, lighter somehow. We just cut the red ribbon on the new headquarters for the Open Door Foundation. It is not located in a stuffy office building downtown, but right here in a renovated west wing of the estate. The very walls that used to be a prison for my daughter have been knocked down and replaced with floor-to-ceiling glass, letting in the blinding California sunshine. I stood at the back of the room and watched Sarah take the podium. She was not the trembling girl in the maid uniform who flinched at a raised hand anymore. She wore a sharp white suit, looking every bit the daughter of a man who built empires. She told her story to a room full of donors, lawyers, and survivors, speaking about the darkness, not to garner pity, but to show them the path out. After the applause died down and the guests began to mingle, I walked out to the garden near the rose bushes where I had once hidden as a gardener. Sarah found me there holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. She leaned against the railing beside me, looking out at the city lights flickering below us. "You know, Dad," she said softly, "I used to hate this view. I used to look at those lights and feel like every single one of them was a life I could never have. And now," I asked, studying her profile, which looked so much like her mother's. She smiled, and it was a smile that finally reached her eyes. "Now I look at them and I see work to be done. I see people waiting for a door to open." She turned to me and took my hand, her grip strong and assured. "I could not have done this without you. You did not just save me, you gave me the tools to save myself." I shook my head gently. "You did the heavy lifting, Sarah. I just cleared the rubble. I spent 40 years thinking my legacy would be the steel and concrete structures I left behind in the desert. I thought my name on a brass plaque was immortality. I was a fool. Standing there next to my daughter, watching her lead and watching her heal others, I realized that my greatest project was never a skyscraper. It was standing right next to me. The buildings will eventually crumble. Concrete cracks and steel rusts. But the strength I see in my daughter, that is something that will outlast us both." As we walked back inside to join the celebration, I took one last look at the front gate. It is open. It is always open now, and for the first time in a long time I am not planning for the next war. I am simply enjoying the peace. Money can buy a $4.5 million house, but it cannot buy a family. I spent a lifetime accumulating wealth, thinking it was a shield, but it nearly became the sword that destroyed us. I almost lost my daughter because I believed in the sanctity of blood and the lies of a man who called me dad while sharpening his knife. I learned the hard way that titles mean nothing. Husband, mother-in-law, son. These are just words. Real family are the people who stand by you when the world turns its back. They are the ones who protect you when you are weak. I take a sip of my coffee, the warmth spreading through my chest, as Sarah waves to me from the rose bushes. I wave back, my heart full. I am no longer the stranger in my own home. I am the watchman. I am the father. And let this be a warning to anyone who thinks they can prey on the kindness of this family again. I may look like a retired old man enjoying the sunset, but the wolf is still inside, sleeping, with one eye open. And anyone who touches a hair on my daughter's head will understand exactly what it means to face the absolute scorching rage of a father who has nothing left to lose. This story is a reminder to us all that financial abuse is a silent epidemic that hides behind the closed doors of even the most beautiful homes. We often think of abuse as physical, but the control of money, the isolation from support systems, and the manipulation of reality are just as deadly. Never ignore the red flags when a partner tries to cut you off from your family or takes complete control of your assets. And to the parents watching, never assume your adult children are safe just because they are married. Check on them. Visit them. Trust your gut instinct. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Your presence is the greatest protection they have. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you are new here, subscribe to the channel for more stories about overcoming the odds. I want to know what you think. Do you believe Gavin deserved a longer sentence? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and love your family fiercely.